I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person.
Oh, no!
But sharks made out of episode. Proud the nation. Hold up, nation. Hey, everybody, welcome. Show Tuesday. Another day of news. So, another day of news and politics and insanity, of course, from the right wing that I'll be talking about. And boy, do we have a good one. Not only do we have, of course, insanity from the right wing, but we also have dangerous insanity and a little bit of the money behind it. Yes, interesting stuff. So, please stay around for the next hour and then some for these incredibly important stories. We have, of course, Lindsey Graham having some private misgivings about the whole voter fraud thing. We're going to talk about that. That's a fun story. We got Trump versus General Milley and some. I'm going to be clearing up some right-wing misinformation. I know, big surprise, right? It's what I do 90% of the time. But misinformation on Afghanistan. So, you know, there's new conspiracy, of course. There's always a new conspiracy about how much in weapons we left in Afghanistan. And so I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about that and how Donald Trump's calling somebody a dope. Okay. All right. That's fun. We've got that. We got Charlottesville neo-Nazis. Turns out they're being funded. Interesting. Where did the money come from? Who is getting paid? And all that. So, and how much organization, by the way, and planning went into Charlottesville? Very interesting. We got Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, cheering on a government shutdown. And then we are going to talk about, of course, Kyrsten Sinema and why she is against the reconciliation package. I got a hint. It has to do with the oodles of money that she has received from pharmaceutical companies. Of course. The corruption. It's right there, corruption. So, like I said, we got a great show for y'all. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Thank you for those who are coming here from Indisputable. I see you. I thank you. I appreciate you. Rashad Ritchie, of course, runs an amazing show, an excellent show. And it's very nice of you to come over here and watch me. So, love it. Thank you. I bet Donald doesn't want to be their friend anymore. Yes! Doesn't want to be my friend anymore. Oh, by the way, I am, right before the show, I started working on a new opening compilation song. You know how I like to do those. I don't have enough of those. And so I'm working on putting another one together. from, different, like, crazy, insane things Republicans have said. And so I'm just wondering, like, if you have any, like, ones that you would like to hear in that cringe compilation, I'd appreciate you sending me that through Twitter at Jeff's Politics. Helps me out. And I'll see if I can put some of that cringe stuff inside that opening, song. I love putting those together. It's a lot of fun, actually. And they said I really enjoy them. So, yeah, help me out. Help me out. I appreciate it. All right, a Christian woman over talking scripture. I believe I might have seen that on Twitter. No, maybe not. But there was a Christian woman of God, says your disgusting rules do not apply to me. Same woman, by the way, who is raged against anal sex. I know, fun times. So yes, I'm working on that. By the way, I do want to put that in there. So be prepared for that one. Be prepared. All right. So that said, got a good show. Let's dive in. Start with Lindsey Graham. Senator Lindsey Graham expressed a little bit of skepticism during a meeting with former President Donald Trump's legal team for voter fraud. Well, that's interesting. Now, according to a new excerpt from the upcoming book from Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, Senator Graham and his cohorts were not really impressed by the evidence of mass voter fraud that was presented to them. So now, Lindsey Graham, we know Lindsey Graham. He's a bootlicker. He can't wait to polish them boots with his tongue. And so, that said, even though he is, and he's so desperate for a best friend in Congress to replace John McCain, that he's like doing everything he can to suck up. But at the same time, there are just some things that you can't do. Because it turns out if you're going to allege mass voter fraud, you might actually want to present evidence that proves your case. And so Lindsey Graham, being the bootlicker he is, decides to try to personally help, right? And so he gets in here and says, all right, give me the evidence. I want to see the evidence. What do you got? What do you got? So in the book, Peril describes a meeting Graham had with Rudy Giuliani just days before January 6th. During the meeting with Mark Meadows and Giuliani, he said, quote, give me some names. You need to put it in writing. You need to show me the evidence. Oh, interesting. Weird. So that shows like, okay, this is something that he wants to see. He actually does want evidence or else you can't move forward. And Lindsey Graham's smart enough to know that. Now, Giuliani said, well, oh, don't worry. I'll get you the evidence. It'll be on Monday. We're going to give you the evidence. Yeah, we're going to have proof that all these ballots were cast by dead people and people under 18. We got irregularities. We got so many irregularities. Let me tell you. What, you got bamboo ballots? You got what evidence are you packing? Come on. Shower it on me, okay? Well, okay, maybe not use that terminology, especially around when it relates to Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. But okay. Anyway, so now, unfortunately, the Trump team did not have that evidence because it didn't exist. There was no mass voter fraud. It doesn't exist at all. The instances that have been found of voter fraud, because it does exist, okay? Voter fraud is a thing, but it is incredibly rare. And it turns out that most of those are usually either mistakes by the person that was making them, or in the cases where it's not mistakes, usually it happens to be right-wingers that have voted more than once. Now, let me give you one example. That was Edward Snodgrass, who admitted to forging his dead father's signature on an absentee ballot and then voting again as himself. Snodgrass, of course, is a Republican, I believe city councilman, and voted for Donald Trump twice using his father. So, and again, the reason that those stories are so few and make so much noise in the headlines is because of how rare voter fraud actually is. So now I have an anecdote. Okay, I know anecdotes, they're not actual evidence, but I figure I will add to this with this anecdotal story to illustrate one of the situations where voter fraud can absolutely happen. Now, the story I have is a mutual, an acquaintance of mine, someone I know very well, knew a woman who was very mentally disabled. Okay, and again, I can't really give you the details to protect privacy and things like that. Never give up your sources, right? And so this person, very mentally ill, lived in a home. She ended up actually being coerced by her brother to vote for Donald Trump. Brother of sound mind, she was not. And so what he did is basically filled out her ballot for her with Donald Trump. So now here's the thing. There are situations where you can actually mark another person's ballot on behalf of someone else. However, it requires that person to be of sound mind and physically disabled. And of course, you have to have permission. You have to sign a bunch of things. And so there's a rigorous process that you have to go through if you want to mark another person's ballot. And again, there has to be a lot of verification that this is what that person wants. Okay, so now in the case of a severely disabled person who has the right to vote, that person may obtain assistance at the polls from an election official and elsewhere from someone else of the voter's choice with an absentee ballot to actually mark the ballot to the disabled person's precise direction. So that ensures that people who are, for example, quadriplegic, and they still have, they're of sound mind, but they can't use their body. They can direct the person to go, okay, this is who I want you to vote for on my, how I want you to mark my ballot. Okay, so that makes sense. Sure. And of course, as I said before, disabled people have a right to vote and they should be able to exercise that. And this is a way to allow them to do so. Now, again, getting back to this anecdotal story that I have. I heard that, again, she was not of sound mind and had no idea what she was doing, had the mental equivalent of pretty much a child, okay? And so her family member took advantage of that in order to get a vote for Trump. So again, this is still a pretty rare situation, understand, and very specific, and not at all an example of mass voter fraud in general. Not representative of the majority of votes being cast. But it is something that does occasionally happen. And I'm sure other people have had similar stories, have seen similar things, or even had similar things happen to them. Incredibly rare. But this is how people do take advantage of people who are disabled, especially with mental disabilities, in order to cast a vote for somebody. And the whole ironic thing about, voting for Republicans or getting a disabled family member to cast an extra vote for Republicans is that Republicans don't care about disabled people at all. And in fact, they would take away disabled people's food stamps and lower their benefits or reduce their benefits. And so the policy positions don't exactly line up. And I always thought that was especially heinous. That said, if you were looking for evidence of mass voter fraud, you're not going to find it. Because again, it doesn't exist. But you will find, out of millions of votes, if you're lucky, a handful of these instances of in-person voter fraud or absentee ballot fraud, which does tell you, by the way, the system does work. Now, Lindsey Graham and a lot of Republicans already know this. They know that it works, and they're doing this, pushing this narrative for political reasons. So now on Lindsey Graham, his ass-kissing ways got him to try and take this more seriously. Even so, when presented with said evidence from Giuliani, he was very unimpressed. He called the claims, quote, suitable for third grade. Trump's legal team eventually presented Graham with several memos questioning the vote in a number of battleground states. I'm going to give you the details here from the Washington Post. The memos from Giuliani included sweeping claims lacking references or evidence One said Pennsylvania processed 682,777 mail-in ballots without proper observation. That is an assertion underlying the suit rejected by a federal judge 2 months earlier. If you deduct just this number, President Trump wins the state by hundreds of thousands, the memo argued, except that there's no evidence of that. Another claimed that hundreds of dead people had voted in Georgia based on an extensive analysis of mail-in and absentee ballot voter names and obituaries. Now, Lindsey Graham looked at these and he's like, well, this is third grade stuff. All right, why don't I give this to my top lawyer, right? This is attorney Lee Holmes. And he said, Lee, why don't you take a look at this, right? And see what you can find. Maybe I'm missing something. Because remember, Republicans want to find voter fraud so that they can justify their crackdown on voting. Okay? So now, Holmes was unconvinced as well. So now he thought it was much more likely, based on Giuliani's own evidence, that some people had voted and then died, which is not entirely unheard of. I mean, again, for one, people do die. Okay, that does happen. People will vote and then pass away. Or, and this is, or I should say, and, there is a pandemic going on, which also means more people have been dying. In fact, we've had over 650,000 Americans die. So, I mean, take that, take that as you will. He was also equally unconvinced by theories about people voting twice, improper absentee ballot applications, and fraudulent ballots cast from vacant or non-existent addresses. I remember covering one of those stories where the one of the people doing the Arizona audit, one of these groups, literally put out on the cover of their report a place where they thought was a vacant, was a place where they believed to be a vacant lot, which was actually a house with a swimming pool. Which matched up to the voter registration records and the voting records. But they're like, oh no, voter fraud because that's an empty lot. No, it's not an empty lot. It's literally a house. And you can see it in the map. And when they got caught, the best part is they got caught and they quietly changed that photo out with another supposed empty lot, which again was not an empty lot. So they're so transparently bad at what they do. It's not that they're like sneaky. They're bad at being sneaky. They're trying to be sneaky and they just suck at it. They really do. They suck. All right. So now there was more. Holmes also could find no public records that would even allow someone to reach these conclusions. According to the accountant Perel, where he could find relevant records, they often contradicted Giuliani's conclusions. Big surprise. For example, claims of nearly 12,000 so-called overvotes in Arizona, when someone picks more than the maximum number of selections allowed, masked the fact that only 180 applied in the presidential contest, not nearly enough to close Biden's margin of victory in the state. Another independent analysis conducted by so-called expert CPAs and Ivy League statisticians presented by Giuliani struck Holmes as unfeasible or, at best, inconclusive, because it would involve matching millions of registered voters with the U.S. Postal Service data. Similar analysis failed to convince a district judge in Nevada, who wrote in a December judgment dismissing a suit from the Trump campaign that there was insufficient information about how the data was obtained and used, and what the rate of false positives would be. Overall, Holmes found the sloppiness, the overbearing tone of certainty, and the inconsistencies disqualifying. The memos, he determined, added up to nothing. Oops. But it wasn't until after a pro-Trump mob ransacked the Capitol that Graham, speaking on the Senate floor, said, quote, "Count me out, enough is enough. I have tried to be helpful." Now that is important because there's nothing Lindsey Graham wants more than to be part of the in-group with Trump, because guess what? That's what the Republican voters want. Lindsey Graham only cares about one thing, and that's career advancement. He's a careerist. Now, you could argue, well, that's a lot of Republicans. And that's true. That's a lot of politicians in general. However, with Lindsey Graham, it's almost like a weird desperation. You know? It is very, very strange. And look, the point that I'm making, though, is this guy can see election conspiracies and reject them personally. But he sees the party, he sees the people's, basically embrace of those conspiracies as like, okay, look, this is bad for the party overall, but if I want to stay in power and I want to appeal to these people and get more power or whatever, then I'm going to have to play the game. And that's it. So he's got to walk that line publicly, like so many Republicans are. And again, I don't feel bad for him having to do that. This is self-inflicted. His bed is made. He's going to lie in it. And that's it. One more note. In a phone call over the summer, Graham did privately rebuke Trump. He actually bemoaned Trump's volatility and focus on voter fraud, telling the former president, quote, "You fucked your presidency up," which then led him to getting hung up immediately by Trump. Ooh. Oh, Lindsey Graham getting all spicy. Whoa. I didn't see that one coming. I would love to listen to that call. That would be fantastic. But, there's the audio. Oh, please get me the audio. So here's the thing, though. When you lose Lindsey Graham, the ass kisser of the century, well, you know you're done. There's no validity or merit to what you're saying at all. And understand that no matter what Lindsey Graham says publicly, we know that he doesn't believe it, just like the others. And all they're doing really is just going out there and lying publicly to appease the hogs in their party. It's all about trying to ride the wave in order to stay relevant and stay into power. That's all these Republicans do, while their party continues to embrace absolute insanity. That's who they are. All right. I'm amazed Lindsey Graham's still around. He's been terrible forever, and it's funny how Republican voters seem to want strength, which Graham does not display. Yeah, I know, right? So weird. So weird. All right. Let's move on here. Former President Donald Trump wants you to know that he knows more about war than anybody, especially that dope General Milley. Take a look.
So I learned early on that he was a dope. I learned that when we walked to the church that was smoldering from the rioters. You know, that's what they were, anarchists that tried to burn it down, that they tried to say were wonderful, just, protesters, friendly protesters. And Milley walked with me, and I walked with numerous people, but Milley, the next day I saw him apologizing. From the day he apologized, they essentially had nothing to do with him because they said, this guy's a dope. He said to me, because I said, we're getting out of Afghanistan, we have to do it, blah, blah, blah. I said, I want every nail, I want every screw, I want every bolt, I want every plane, I want every tank, but I want it down to the nail, screws, bolts, I want the tents. You know, those big, beautiful tents that house the planes. I never saw tents as great as that. They're like hangars. I said, I want all of them deconstructed. I want them. I want every single thing. And he said, sir, it's cheaper to leave it than it is to bring it. I said, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question, because I'm a construction guy, so I understand this stuff better than anybody. I said, let me ask you a question. You think if you have an airplane there, and you're going to leave the airplane instead of putting a tank of gas in, and the airplane might have cost $40 million, $50 million. We got really good stuff, or the Apache helicopters. I said, you mean some brand new, by the way, millions and millions of dollars. So you think it's cheaper to leave it where it is than have 200 pilots fly over and fly all the equipment out? Do you think it's cheaper? Yes, sir. It's cheaper to leave it than it is. I said, I got to tell you, I think you got to be nuts.
You got tents, big, beautiful tents, I love the big tents. They're almost like hangars. Well, actually, they're temporary. They are hangars. Oh, my God. I know more than anyone. You know, I understand this as a construction guy. I know all about the tents. No. Okay, so I love how he goes back to, well, I'm a construction guy. No, you're not. You're not a construction guy. Like, the only time you've ever worn a hard hat is for like a photo op, or when you're trying to pander to coal miners. Shut up. Okay, and here's the thing. He doesn't even build buildings. He's not out there with a hammer. No, and the only buildings, by the way, that he has built, very, very few of them. Most of the buildings with his name on it are just from licensing deals. That's how he gets most of his money. But when he actually did do that, again, it wasn't him out there with a hammer. He hired contractors, designers, etc., that did most, if not all, the work. And sometimes those contractors didn't get paid for it. He literally stiffed the contractors, for example, on the Taj Mahal casino in Atlantic City. He owed them $70 million. Those were 253 different contractors who worked on that building. And guess what? He got away with not paying most of it. So please, the only thing Donald Trump really knows how to do as an expert is screwing over people who have worked for him. Honestly. But anyway, let's get to his assertion, right? Because there's an interesting new narrative coming out of the right wing about Afghanistan. All right. So and we saw it yesterday with Marjorie Taylor Greene and her gun giveaway video, and that's something that I missed the first time that I watched that. But now it's like, oh, they're saying we left $83 billion worth of weapons, tanks and guns and all that for the Taliban, right? So now the Taliban's armed with $83 billion in weapons, and they're going to use it against us, and that's what's going to happen, right? We just left that equipment there for the terrorists. And that's what Trump talks about. Well, we should have taken everything, every screw, every nail, every tank, every plane. Some of them were new. Actually, no, that's not the truth. Turns out that when you break it down, for one, the number is not at all what the right wing is saying. That's false. I know, big surprise, right? So now, yes, $82 billion, I'm sorry, $82.9 billion was the total amount spent on the Afghan Security Forces Fund since 2001. That is an astronomical amount of money. Huge, right? That could have been used somewhere else. It could have been used for healthcare. It could have been used for education. It could have been used for food or building roads here in this country. But instead, we spent it on the Afghan military. Not a good place to spend that money. So, yeah, that's one of those things where, look, we didn't have to spend it there. We shouldn't have spent it there. We shouldn't have gone to war in the first place in Afghanistan. A colossal waste of money. But let me give you a breakdown, right? Because what the right wing is saying is absolutely wrong. The majority of that spent wasn't actually on equipment. About $75 billion of that money was actually dispersed and used. And so what we're talking about for equipment costs actually was a total of $18 billion for equipment and transportation. This is according to the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction report. That is less than $1 billion a year in equipment, and that's still, of course, an enormous amount of money. That money includes, fuel, repair, parts, transportation, and of course, for all those things to get flown to Afghanistan in the first place. So that does add up. And there is a lot of wear and tear. Again, we were there for 20 wasted years. And think about it. If you had a car you've had for 20 years, and you rode it through the desert with people shooting at you, of course, it's going to break down. So, yes, if you've had a car for 20 years, even in normal circumstances, right, it's going to break down. And you're going to spend a lot of money to, of course, repair it or even, restore it. Or at the end of the day, it's probably just junk. And while it might run, it might not even be worth the effort to fix it, much less say you're moving, right? You're in New York, you want to move out to California, or you want to move down to Florida, whatever, right? You get this junky old car. You probably just sell it. You're not going to move it. it's not really going to be worth it. Especially if you can actually afford to buy a new one when you're living in Florida, when you go to the new place, right? And I know these are terrible analogies, but I think you can understand that. All right. So that said, generally for the military and the stuff that they left in Afghanistan, it wasn't worth shipping back. And that's the overall point. Okay. So now Anthony H. Kortzman of the Center for Strategic and International Studies did tell factcheck.org in a phone interview that most of the equipment provided the Afghans had been used in fighting over the last 20 years, and that most of it was still junk. War tends to use stuff up in a hurry, he said. So again, the stuff that we had there was old and kind of crappy and well worn and used, and the stuff that wasn't had already been moved out. This is according to Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, who said the military had actually been relocating or destroying equipment in Afghanistan for several years. Because the plan, of course, was to get out of the country, and that's the right plan, since we were no longer serving in a combat role, more of a training role. General Kenneth McKenzie Jr., commander of U.S. Central Command, also gave some specifics. So now Donald Trump talked about the airplanes. Oh, so many airplanes! So many airplanes! 73 total aircraft at the ramp at Kabul airport, 70 MRAPs and 27 Humvees are just not operable. The planes that were sitting there in the big, beautiful hangars, the big, beautiful tents, were not able to fly. Either parts of them that made them workable were destroyed or demilitarized, that's basically what that means, disabled, or they were damaged beyond repair, and it wasn't worth it. You can't go there with 200 pilots and a tank of gas and fly those out. They don't work anymore. That's why we left them. Dumb. Now, they also, again, when they demilitarized this, they used, in some cases, controlled explosions. Now, there have been reports of controlled explosions at the airport before and during the time that we were pulling out. That's what that was. We were demilitarizing old gear so that the Taliban couldn't use it. The military also claims they destroyed weapon systems like those that intercepted rockets and mortars. So, again, in reality, over the last few years, we had been removing that equipment and then destroying the stuff that wasn't worth taking. So now, that does not include the stuff the Afghan military was actually using, that when they surrendered to the Taliban was able to take over. Okay, so that is where they got a lot of their U.S.-made weapons, and so they are in possession of that. Now, what's more disturbing is that the Taliban was actually in possession as well as to documentation, biometric data that showed the Afghans which Afghans were helping U.S. forces. So that puts their lives in direct danger. So that's a big disaster. The equipment, not so much, and let me tell you why. Okay, so now, oh, and by the way, let me just add too, there were some reports that Afghan pilots had fled the country in some jets and helicopters. So let me just add that, okay? So now, again, if you're worried that the Taliban is now going to take our weapons and turn them on us and attack us, it's actually very unlikely that that's going to happen. For one, we're not in Afghanistan anymore. Thank goodness. Look, all the Taliban wants to do is run their little fundamentalist hellhole without us messing it up. That's what they want to do. So they don't want us in there. They don't want us protecting women. They want to oppress women. They want to do all the things that they're doing in their nice little fundamentalist state, right? Okay. And so that's what's going on there. That sucks, but again, that's no excuse for us to actually be there. And again, they didn't want us there to begin with. They offered up our forces, they offered up Osama bin Laden to our forces 3 times, right? And so every time they did that, they said, no, we want to go to war. We would rather go to war with Afghanistan. That went through Bush, and then Obama, and then Trump. And that's what happened. 20 years of wasted money and lives. complete and utter disaster. For nothing. For nothing. So now that said, the equipment there, the thing about that is the equipment that they did get from the Afghan military is going to break down. It turns out that this is according to Lauren Thompson, a defense industry consultant, military analyst at Lexington Institute, quote, U.S. military equipment tends to require extensive support from technical specialists. In the absence of such specialists, much of it will run down due to wear and a lack of spare parts, which of course we're not going to be sending them. We're going to be sending them spare parts? What are you kidding me? No, you're not going to get any support from us. She said, vehicles also tend to wear out fairly quickly because of inadequate maintenance. And of course, she said this really applies in particular to aircraft, which will likely be grounded in short order. So the videos you see, you're not going to see Taliban driving around or flying around, I should say, in any of our military planes or helicopters for that much longer. All right, well, there you go. Vehicles also, for example, MRAPs, will be especially hard to keep operating because they consume copious amounts of fuel, will likely be in scarce supply, again, without suppliers. So, yeah, at some point, all the fancy shit that the Afghan military had is going to break down, and then the Taliban's going back to AK-47s and pickup trucks. All right, well, okay. Now, just a personal note here. The AK-47 is actually superior to the American M4. Why? It's easier to clean. It's easier. It doesn't jam, okay? Or at least jam as easily than the M4 does. It's better in areas filled with dust. It's almost indestructible. Likely cheaper to acquire as well and maintain. And so they're going to go back to that, mainly because it happens to work better. And of course, you can get cheap pickups and mounted guns and all that stuff. And so generally, they're not going to be using our equipment for that long anyway, because they don't have the support. Now, Thompson also added, in thinking about the price tag of equipment we left behind, it is worth remembering that much of it has been in the country for some time. Its value will have likely depreciated from the original purchase price. Some of the equipment brought home from Iraq, for example, could not be restored to a useful state and ended up being retired. So basically, all that is context into showing why this narrative that has been regurgitated by Donald Trump and much of the right wing is absolutely wrong. It's just there's just no factual basis in it when you look into the details of how things actually work. But it riles people up and it scares people because, oh my God, oh, we left the Taliban, we've got a bunch of terrorists now with our guns. Not really. Not really. So again, the thing is, and that's really sad and really needs to be focused on here, is how much money was wasted buying this equipment and using it in Afghanistan in the first place was. Billions of dollars went down the drain. Most of what we spent was actually paying the Afghan army and police forces. So getting back to that original $82.9 billion, of which only $75 billion was dispersed and used, 37 of it, $37 billion was actually used to just pay the salaries of Afghan army and police officers. That's it. The rest was for training and infrastructure. The $18 billion, of course, were for equipment. The training and infrastructure, which included ammunition, was around $20 billion. I'm sorry. The ammunition is actually included in the $37 billion. Sorry. The rest, training and infrastructure, as I said, was around $20 billion. So that's how the money breaks down. So again, that's a gigantic waste of money. What a waste. According to the Cost of War Project, based at the university's Wanston Institute for International Public Affairs, the war in Afghanistan cost the United States $2.3 trillion to date, a price that includes U.S. operations in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. Notably, that figure does not include the money the country will spend on lifetime care for veterans, nor does it encompass forthcoming interest payments for money borrowed to fund the war effort, because this is just one of George W. Bush's unfunded wars as a result of 9/11. So Now, again, Republicans, they don't talk about the costs, though. Oh, no, they don't talk about the $2.3 trillion we actually spent on going to war with Afghanistan, a war that their party started. All right? But they do tell us how we can't afford health care or do something about climate change, but we're perfectly fine spending all that money on the defense contractors for nothing. Now, the only reason they're complaining, and by the way, Democrats do it too. And let me just point out that Democrats also always tend to vote to increase the budget for the Pentagon. And of course, they also voted in favor of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The only Democrat that voted against that, the authorization for use of military force, was Representative Barbara Lee. She was right. Barbara Lee was 100% right. She knew what a boondoggle it was, and no one else did. So, you know, they both love the war, okay? So the both parties, okay? But again, Republicans now are complaining only because of politics. They know that most people oppose the war in Afghanistan. They know that most people are not going to do any research into this, whatever, and I don't actually blame them. But they are taking advantage of it because, again, who's got time for that when you're working your ass off to feed your family? You know, sometimes working your uniquely two American jobs. All they see now from Fox News, which unfortunately is the most widely viewed channel in this country, is Biden left $83 billion for the Taliban. And that's it. And of course, they're going to play off of it. They're going to fearmonger it. They're going to try to use that to maybe fearmonger us into the next disastrous war. And of course, the only way to avoid this is to not get into any wars. Cut the Pentagon budget massively. At the very least, cut it in half, probably more, and use that money to rebuild our nation at home. I'm talking Green New Deal. I'm talking, human infrastructure. I'm talking Medicare for all. That's the stuff that we should be spending this money on instead of war. Now, if you support these things like the majority do, well, you can stop by not listening to lying right-wing politicians when they try to distract you with gross bullshit lies like this. The truth is, that money should not have been spent there. It should have been spent at home, improving material conditions in this country. But again, that is not what the right wing is saying. We did not hand over billions of dollars in weapons to the Taliban. They can use it against us. Most of it is junked, destroyed, or will fall apart with the next few years with no one to maintain it, and that is true. It is a huge waste to be sure, but once again, I'm going to remind you, that's exactly what war is. A gigantic, complete waste of money, life, and resources. Kind of like Donald Trump. So there you go. All right. Thirsty. All right. Let's move on. Oh, it's almost been an hour already, and I'm only through 2 stories. Jesus. All right. The organizers of the 2017 hate rally in Charlottesville were funded by private right-wing groups, this is according to a new lawsuit. Now, the event, the Unite the Right rally, which ended in catastrophe when a neo-Nazi drove his car into a crowd of counter-demonstrators, murdering Heather Heyer and injuring others. That event, well, I mean, obviously it was horrifying. It was a gigantic news spectacle. These were literal neo-Nazis marching through the streets, and they hurt people. And yet Donald Trump, President Donald Trump at the time, oh, there are good people on both sides. Yeah, of course. So now survivors of that attack had filed a lawsuit against Unite the Right's organizers. Now, in response to this, they said, oh, we didn't have anything to do with that. No, we didn't organize this. What are you talking about? The hate rally? No. I mean, it was a loosely organized rally, and so we're not really at fault of what happened. No, not at all. Now, again, that might be pretty difficult because according to a tranche of new evidence exhibits entered by plaintiffs in that lawsuit, suggests that Unite the Right's organizers actually collaborated very closely on the event, even running their own so-called non-profit groups in order to get funding for this and to pay neo-Nazis. So now the case is Sines versus Kessler and is scheduled to actually go to trial next month. So now there was a lot of evidence exhibits that were shown. It's not the full text of the evidence, but it already includes more than 3,000 exhibits, including text messages between white supremacist leaders, legal documents from far-right groups, and medical documents from car attack victims. So now, why is that in there, that last part? Well, there's a certain conspiracy theory, of course, here we go, launched from members of the right wing about the victims' injuries. And so this evidence, these exhibits, would be, presented as a way to debunk that narrative and show how disastrous, how many injuries, and how bad they were from the white supremacist attack in Charlottesville. All right. So now, according to the article in the Daily Beast, defendants of the suit have previously attempted to downplay culpability in Unite the Right's chaos, describing the rally as loosely organized and not intentionally violent. But text messages to and from defendant Elliot Klein and key Unite the Right organizers suggest significant coordination and funding. In one text message, Klein appears to describe the breakup that resulted from his involvement with white supremacist groups. Good. Girl, you run. You run. You run now. You get out of there. Save yourself. In the message, he describes an upcoming well-paid job within a defunct white supremacist group known as Identity Evropa. I've talked about them before. Thankfully, they no longer exist. Nonetheless, they were a clear white supremacist hate group. Here's what the text said. Quote, I'm about to double down in the movement harder than I already have. I asked her if she thought it was a good idea. She was excited. And now she wants out. It's too late for me to turn it down now. Half the reason I took the opportunity was because I knew I'd be able to support her with it. It's secret, but I'm taking over IE, Identity Evropa, from Nathan, and I'm going to be paid from private donors some good money. Literally getting paid just to hate people. Jesus. Although the preview of the exhibit does not include timestamps, the conversation appears to have taken place before or in the days immediately following Unite the Right. Klein, who went by the pseudonym Eli Mosley at the time of Unite the Right, took over Identity Evropa from its founder, Nathan D'Amigo, 2 weeks after the deadly rally. Other texts to and from Klein in the exhibit list suggest a flow of money into the white supremacist movement, particularly through Identity Evropa. So far, we don't know the donors to that so-called nonprofit, but it went from the donors to the group to people representing the group and white supremacists who were prominent at that rally and, of course, to set up said rally. So now, during a conversation that appeared to take place while it was in its planning stages, D'Amigo texted Klein, quote, I'm going to move forward tomorrow to get you on the payroll. That group was a registered nonprofit in California. Can you imagine? In chat logs previously leaked by the media group Unicorn Riot, Identity Evropa members were seen using that nonprofit to solicit donations for their legal fund to combat lawsuits like Sines versus Kessler. Exhibits in Sines versus Kessler also suggest that the group attempted to prevent leaks with at least one mutual NDA between Klein and D'Amigo. Since it is no longer a corporation, it has been incorporated. I should say that incorporation has been dissolved and is now defunct. That NDA no longer exists. So now other exhibits suggest the base structure was broader than Identity Evropa. During a conversation that appeared to take place before the rally, white supremacist Richard Spencer told Klein that, quote, also, we're going to pay you. During the rally planning process, Klein also texted the event's main organizer, Jason Kessler, that you and I should get used to speaking daily now. Now that this is my full-time job, I'll be much more available to you. So it must have been really, really good money, which suggests billionaire or very, very wealthy donors. Big surprise. Big surprise. It's almost as if white nationalism and white supremacy has all the money. But here's the thing. Of course, I call it a hate job, but I swear some people are going to be like, oh, but you understand, it's not hate, it's history. There's a bunch of patriots who didn't want to erase history. There was great people. There was good people on both sides. No, let me just say, it's not a controversial opinion. These people are the lowest of the low. Racists and neo-Nazis are the scum of the earth. They're also pretty dumb. Let's be honest. They think they're smart, though, and that's the worst kind of dumb person, is the person who swears that they're actually really smart. Because, oh no, we're going to try to use science to dehumanize people by, like, doing weirdo shit like measuring skull shapes and cranial sizes. Get the fuck out of here. Oh, it's a measure of your intelligence. No, these are some of the most arrogantly stupid people on the planet. And yet, they've been getting a lot of money. And it's because, of course, their interests align to members of the elite. And that's what they do, by the way. The established order favors wealthy white Protestant Christian men. That's just what happens. So, now obviously, being a hate group is out of style with the majority of the American people. To be a Nazi, the United States, by the way, to be a Nazi is obviously very, very unpopular. People don't like Nazis for good reason. And so not only that, but the United States itself, the population is more diverse and more socially progressive. We're actually, becoming a more tolerant, better country on social issues. And I think that's fantastic. What's also great about that is people like Kessler and Spencer are social outcasts, social and political outcasts. And that's excellent. They should be. Now, of course, the result of that, and they knew this was the case. That's why you saw Richard Spencer, for example, cleaned up their image, the image of the white nationalist. So I remember all the fawning New York Times coverage, for example, of the dapper Richard Spencer, member of the alt-right. So they're the alt-right, and they're the internet race realists, or the intellectual dark web, but they're all the same thing. The Nazi is a Nazi is a Nazi, and that's what they are. And Kessler knew that that was part of their audience. In fact, while discussing a statement from a member of the group Proud Boys, Kessler told Klein in the text, quote, "I think it's all right, except he kind of backs himself in the corner by pretending some of our guys aren't Nazis. I think he needs more wiggle room, just in case there are salutes." Of course. What else can you take from this, other than the fact, of course, this is just a sampling of the evidence that they have to show that this hate rally was absolutely planned, coordinated, and funded by white supremacists and gigantic donors. And it was planned for white supremacists as an attempt to, I think, make a comeback in popular culture. What they want, more than anything, is notoriety, power, and, of course, to create a race war. That's what they want. Their ultimate dream and goal is to fracture the country along racial lines, that they maintain their power over others, power they believe is theirs by nature of birthright, which, of course, is disgustingly un-American, because that's not the way we do things, okay? But white supremacy is a stand in this country, on the history, and we cannot let this have a resurgence, ever. So I'm glad they're going after this group. I cannot wait to see what other evidence is in this case to present, and I hope these horrible people get taken to the cleaners by these victims of the Charlottesville hate rally, and end up as poor and irrelevant to this nation and its future as the now sad, broke, and alone Richard Spencer is. One can only hope. All right. Let's go to Marjorie Taylor Greene. What a ridiculous argument they're going to make. All right. debt ceiling is fast approaching, and Republicans in Congress are threatening to let the nation default. And of course, if that happens, will cause a government shutdown. So now, during an appearance on Real America's Voice, Marjorie Taylor Greene argues that we should absolutely let that happen. We should default on our debt. We should shut down the government so that we don't become, quote, slaves to China. Take a look.
And listen, everyone, if you're watching this show, this is the best show to watch because you learn in advance what's happening in Washington and stopping the CR, stopping them from continuing on with the debt, the massive debt that they're piling on you, the American taxpayer, is so critical. We have to stop the debt ceiling from being raised because Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, they want to continue it for another 15 months. They want to delay the debt ceiling. They want to push it back 15 months so they can ram through the infrastructure bill and the budget. And the reason why the infrastructure bill is the most dangerous bill is because it is the pathway to a massive socialist spending program. But you see, it's the Republicans and the so-called problem solvers caucus who are really creating the problems because they're so busy playing ring around the rosy with the Democrats, trying to say that, oh, so they can go back home and say we're bringing home the bacon and paving roads in our districts, when in reality they're setting up the passage for the Green New Deal, which is in raw form in the budget, the $3.5 trillion budget that is going to enslave all of you to China.
This is the path.
Going to enslave all of you to China. China. God damn, she's thirsty for war. That's the only thing I can take from this constant rhetoric against China. They're thirsty. They're thirsty. They want war with China. Yeah, I know. That's insane. We'd never go to war with China. Well, I mean, hopefully we don't. But here's the thing. That in part plays to them being an excellent villain, right, for Republicans, neocons, and warhawks. So they know, okay, very, very unlikely that we go to war with China, thank God. But they can say, well, look at the villainous China. All of our problems are China. China, China, China. Oh, my God, China. This is the same thing they did with the Soviet Union, by the way, during the Cold War, which was fantastic for defense contractors and war hawks because we got in all these different proxy wars. And again, I cannot be the only person that has noticed all the right-wing rhetoric aimed at China and making them a boogeyman. And to be clear, I'm not saying China good. I'm saying war bad. So now, how does this apply to the debt ceiling? Well, the debt ceiling, let me give you a definition, right? It is the limit, the total amount of money that the United States government is authorized to borrow to meet existing legal obligations, including Social Security, Medicare, military salaries, interest on the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments. So let me be clear, this is not new spending. The whole thing, the whole idea of trying to tie this to the reconciliation bill is BS. They're not the same. They're not even related. The reconciliation bill would authorize $3.5 trillion of new spending. And a lot of that, of course, is actually repurposed spending from other things. What the continuing resolution would be is that essentially we would be paying for things that we've already spent money on. Think about it this way. Let me make a terrible analogy because I'm always great at these. You go to a nice sit-down restaurant, you order your food, they bring it over, you eat it, you enjoy it, you had a nice time. Great. All right, well, the server comes around, takes your empty plate, and that's it, right? No, of course not. You got to pay the bill. So now what happens if you don't pay the bill? Well, it turns out you're going to get in a little bit of trouble. Why? Because, well, for one, the food costs money, the labor costs money, the advertising costs money, and if you don't pay the bill, well, you yourself get in trouble for stealing, but the restaurant itself loses out. Now, the analogy, of course, is not perfect, as always. My analogies are really not great, but the restaurant itself will be fine if a person skips out on a meal. But if everybody skips out, that's a bigger problem because then they don't get any money. So now what happens is a similar thing. The United States, if we don't borrow the money to pay the obligations we already owe, well, there's going to be some consequences. And they're going to be rather big, much more than the restaurant analogy that I tried to use. The United States government would default on its money. Certain payments would stop going out to the American people. And eventually, all the money borrowed would be gone. Now, they do some accounting tricks first to make things happen. That's why we only had a partial shutdown in the times where there was a government shutdown, because they would miraculously find money now and then. Okay, so now, at some point, though, if a shutdown went long enough, they would run out of that. And, you know, for this arbitrary limit that they set, and they couldn't technically borrow any more money to pay anything. And so payments, of course, wouldn't go out for Social Security, no more money for the states, no more money for the federal programs, parks, etc. As I mentioned before, we had partial shutdowns, and that's what happened. They started closing up parks. That long-term shutdown, however, which would, of course, never happen, but say it did, it would be an economic disaster for this country and for the people who relied on that money. And they know this. They can't all be that stupid. Well, okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene can absolutely be that stupid. But Steve Bannon? No, Steve Bannon is a terrible person in a million different ways. But one thing he isn't is stupid. What he's doing is playing politics. And by the way, speaking of politics, and that's what this is all about, in order to, of course, sink the Democrats. Under Trump, the Republicans had no issue raising the debt ceiling at all, and adding trillions to it with gigantic tax cuts for the rich. Trump's tax cuts cost $2.3 trillion over the next 10 years. So you want to talk about debt? You want to talk about, oh my God, we can't borrow any money if it's China. Okay, here's the thing. Every time Republicans get into office, they boost that debt significantly by cutting taxes on corporations and the wealthy and funneling more money to the military budget. Now, Democrats, of course, give money to the military all the time. Everybody gives money to the military, and I think it sucks. But Democrats do, to be fair, when they're in power, they do increase social spending to make material conditions for working class people a little bit better. Now, that, of course, does add to the so-called, the debts and deficits, right? And until Obama, the debt limit wasn't really all that controversial. It was raised without any fanfare, despite George W. Bush borrowing trillions of dollars to go to war with Iraq and Afghanistan while simultaneously cutting taxes for the rich. That's why these are unfunded wars. So spare me the indignation and concern about debts and deficits. This is all political bullshit. Now, speaking of bullshit, we have more of that video, more of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon. Take a look.
They need the deplorables' permission to get a budget for the next fiscal year and to increase the debt ceiling. And if they don't get either, they have no money. So
yeah, but let's keep them shut down, because what did they do to the American people? How many small businesses closed over COVID? Over 100,000.
By the way, Congressman Green, we're not shutting them down. They're shutting down themselves. They're control the government. This is Pelosi. This is Schumer. This is Biden. This is Jen Psaki. They're going to have to shut down their own government. We're sitting here saying, hey, where's the appropriations plan? Where's the budget? Let's roll. Oh, you don't have it? Not going to do a CR. Not going to kick the can down the road. And we're not raising the debt ceiling. And you combined them. We didn't. You combined them. You want an up or down vote? You're going to get an up or down vote. Show us your plan. You're not going to enslave our children. Right now, they're Russian serfs because of what you've done. Now they're going to be debt slaves. We're not going to do it. And by the way, everybody in this audience is going to get an impact too. You're not going to be a debt slave. Your children are not going to be debt slaves. Your grandchildren are not going to be debt slaves, because in September and October 2021, we called their bluff.
Right, but don't grow weak when they roll out the sob stories, because those are coming.
Oh, sob stories. And not just that, you're demons. You guys are demons. 3.5 million people out of work. Capital markets are going to think we're defaulting. Hey. Janet Yellen said we're bankrupt. She said we're going to default unless you raise the credit card. Well, hey, that's not your fault. Hey, sounds like a personal problem.
Let me just note real quick. Oh, I don't want the American people. We don't want them to be debt slaves. We are corporations. There's 4 to 7 trillion. I'm not sure the exact number of how much the American people owe to student loans. That's debt. Consumer debt is fairly high because wages have not kept up with the inflation. Wages haven't kept up with productivity. You want to talk about debt slaves? We are debt slaves. We're already debt slaves. We're already debt slaves. We're already wage slaves. Ridiculous. Come on. Come on. Bannon. Dumbass. Okay, but anyway, there's so much other bullshit. And by the way, also, what about medical debt? Medical debt. You can't discharge certain things from bankruptcy. Partly as a result of Joe Biden, for the student loans at least. And so, come on. We're already debt slaves. Ridiculous. But again, that's just one of the bullshit arguments that he uses. But all right, let's talk about the 100,000 businesses that closed over COVID. They closed as a result of COVID because the government failed to contain the virus under Trump. We didn't even do a full shutdown. We did like a partial shutdown. And even so, again, you had these programs for businesses to go and borrow money. It's the Paycheck Protection Program, right? So now that program actually did save a lot of businesses. Now, that said, a lot of larger corporations that had no business dipping into it did. And, they shouldn't have. And that took money away, of course, from small businesses who actually could have benefited from that money and stayed in business. Now, funny enough, a lot of the people that complain about the Paycheck Protection Program that are Republicans also, some of them had businesses that got money from the Paycheck Protection Program. Little hypocrisy here. Now, are you saying you should have never received that? I mean, that's part of the money that's due that you would have to raise the debt ceiling for. Oh, but you don't want to borrow the money from China, huh? Okay, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, if you're so concerned about borrowing money from China, then you may want to stop taking your paycheck. I mean, that is part of the government's obligation. You're an employee of the government, right? That's part of their obligation is to pay employees. Well, are you going to stop taking a paycheck, Marge? Come on, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and stop taking your paycheck? That's $174,000 less that the government would have to borrow to pay your ass. So why don't you do that? How about all the Republicans that are bitching about the debt ceiling right now forego their paychecks? What about that? How about that, huh? Why don't you do that? Save the government hundreds of thousands of dollars. Don't take a paycheck. It's not like they can't afford to do that. Congress is literally full of millionaires. They get all this money from their investments anyway. So why not? It's not like they're going to be impacted personally. It's only $174,000 a year. Put your money where your mouth is. Come on. Come on. No, chances are they're never going to do it. They're never going to do it. Oh, it's my money. What are you talking about? I earned that. How dare you come after my pay? Oh. No, you don't want to be a slave to China, don't you? Just give them your paycheck. Simple as that. Simple as that. Look, I can make ridiculous demands too. I just did. But I don't have to lie about how the things actually work. And that's different. Unlike Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon, who are obvious liars, absolute shameless liars. And the Republicans who are complete and total hypocrites about the debt ceiling. This country, by the way, they keep saying the same thing. Oh, the country's broke. This country's broke. You can't actually go broke if you can print your own money. Now, of course, there is a concern about inflation, but we're really not there. There's an issue with pay not keeping up with the cost of goods and services. That's been going on for a very, very long time. And the solution to that is, of course, to raise wages. But the only reason that they're trotting out this tired argument now about, oh my God, we're suddenly fiscally conservative. And now that Democrats in office, we're fiscally conservative. Because Democrats actually have a chance, not that they're going to take it, but like they have a chance through some of the stuff in the reconciliation package, which is good, to make people's lives materially better. They have a chance to do that. And of course, you have Republicans, old Republicans, and then corporate Democrats who, get paid by the donors to block this, to prevent that increase. That helping the material conditions of American workers. And so they do this all the time. I mean, whenever there's talk about doing something for the American people, as opposed to giving to the war budget or tax cuts for the rich and corporations, they have what David Dayen called the deficit hawk industry. He says he says that it comes alive in Washington to tell the country that we just can't afford to do these things. Oh man, we're broke. Oh no. But all that is just nothing more than propaganda that's meant to stop popular progressive policies from actually being passed. Because if it did, and this is what the political thing is, Democrats would actually hold on to power. And that's not good for the donors, the corporations who don't want to pay taxes. That's what it comes down to. As always, this is another case of Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon, caping for billionaires to prevent something possibly good, the good stuff that's in this reconciliation bill, from happening. All right. Moving on, we got one more story. I promised you the Sinema story, so let's do it. Hey, what am I going on here? You know what that means?
There's insanity in the control room.
Okay. Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema is facing some backlash for rejecting the White House's push to lower prescription drug prices and expand Medicare. So now, according to Politico, the Arizona Democrat is opposed to the current prescription drug pricing proposals in both the House and the Senate bills, two sources familiar with her thinking said. So now she also said that she doesn't support a pared-back alternative being pitched by House Democratic centrists that would limit the drugs subject to Medicare negotiation. So basically, not even partial negotiation. She says, no negotiation whatsoever. Drug companies should be able to charge you whatever they want. So now, both she and Senator Joe Manchin, who met with the president the same day, delivered what one source described as a sobering message for the White House about the fate of the reconciliation bill and its $3.5 trillion price tag, which they both claim is too high. As I mentioned, of course, deficits don't actually matter. What this is that it's actually an investment. But understand that this investment would affect rich people. So, of course, their donors, for Manchin, of course, in the pharmaceutical industry as well as oil and gas, he doesn't want any of the climate change measures that are inside this reconciliation package to go forward. And for Kyrsten Sinema, of course, it's pharmaceutical money. And look, that prescription drug pricing measure, which would allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drugs, that's one of the most simplistic, common sense plans I've ever seen, right? Why would we not allow Medicare, the government, to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies? In fact, we have literally barred them from doing so. I mean, again, this is one of the biggest elements championed by the White House. And again, this was mainly pushed by Bernie Sanders in his Medicare for All bill. Senator Sanders managed to get the White House to actually agree to have Medicare negotiate the price of prescription drugs. Why? It's because it's popular. Nobody likes paying as much as we do here in America, literally the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, because we are not allowed to negotiate. How insane is that? When they jack up their prices, which they've done for decades, the government just has to say, what can we do? We have no power to negotiate with you. I guess we have to pay your insane rates. And then again, that's for government, the government that spends a lot of money buying medication for people on Medicare. And it also has a sort of a trickle-down effect on all the other prescription drugs as well in this country. And of course, there's the reason. Go to the reasoning here. The money. Of course, follow the money. Sinema ranks as one of Congress's leading recipients of pharmaceutical industry donations, according to an analysis by Kaiser Health News. For the 2019 to 2020 election cycle through March, political action committees run by employees of drug companies and their trade groups actually gave her $98,500 in campaign funds. That's just one cycle. They've given her nearly $400,000 since she got into office. Sinema's pharma haul was twice that of Senator Suzanne Collins of Maine, considered one of the most vulnerable Republicans in November, and approached that of fellow Democrat Steny Hoyer, the powerful House Majority Leader from Maryland. Understand that this is the effect of money in politics. I know there are still people out there who believe, oh no, money in politics is fine. No, what are you talking about? They're just talking to their congressman. That's it. It doesn't have any sort of effect on Congress people. Oh no, how dare you? How dare you insinuate that these honorable gentlemen and ladies and who are representing their districts that take all this money could be corrupt? Oh no, they're just happening to support their constituents by agreeing 100% with the pharmaceutical companies. Bullshit. 100%. No, the pharmaceutical industry gives millions of dollars in legalized bribes, and they're not doing it out of the goodness of their own hearts. As KHN notes, it all adds up to the bet by drug companies that the 43-year-old Sinema, first elected to the Senate in 2018, will gain influence in coming years and serve as an industry ally in a party that also includes many lawmakers, harshly critical of high drug prices and the companies that set them. Stephen Billett, a former AT&T lobbyist who teaches PAC management at George Washington University, said this, quote, "This is a long-term play. If I'm a pharmaceutical guy, I'm saying, you know what? Maybe this is someone we can work with down the road." So understand, this is Sinema hedging her bets and saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go full in on Big Pharma. They gave me a ton of money, and yeah, I'm going to serve them because later on, well, again, they're going to continue to give me money for my re-election campaigns, and so they give me the legal bribes. I'm going to do their bidding because this is a real good relationship for me. Yeah, but not so good for the constituents of Arizona or any member of the country. Again, we are all sick of high drug prices. This is an incredibly popular policy prescription, and she is literally in the way, but then claims, oh, no, it's not about that at all. No, it's not about drug prices. I support lowering drug prices. Oh, yes. It's just that this bill is just way too expensive. We don't believe that at all. No, what she's doing is she's working together with the drug companies in order to make sure that we as the people pay higher prices for prescription drugs. The highest prices on the planet for the most profitable industries on the planet. They are screwing all of us. Look, it should be clear by now, I think, to everybody, and I think people in her district are starting to get it, that she is a complete and utter sellout. She sold us out on the $15 minimum wage and is selling us out again. Literally trying to take a bill that expands childcare, Medicare, brings down the price of prescription drugs, all because she got money from her donors. And here's the irony, right? All through the media, after AOC and members of the squad won their election, we had hit piece after hit piece after hit piece saying, oh my God, these progressives are going to stop Biden's agenda. They're going to hurt the Democrats. They're going to hurt Biden's agenda. They're going to block her. Every time they've been proven wrong. You know why? Because it always happens to be the so-called moderates to corporate Democrats that kill the Democrats' agenda. It's Democrats killing the Democrats' agenda. It's not progressives. And so remember, Joe Lieberman, Blue Dog Democrats. And they're not the only ones. Again, there's been a long history, longer than I've been in politics at all. They're the ones killing the Democrats' agenda. They're the ones. And so, no, they're actually hurting the Democrats' re-election chances, by the way. They're going to get killed by Republicans in the midterms if they don't actually pass this. Something that's significant. But it's the same story. Corporate Democrats. They're corrupted, paid off, and they kill the agenda. And look, also, by the way, there is a rotating villain. Okay? And so the Democratic Party, again, takes lots and lots of money from these pharmaceutical companies. And so Manchin and Sinema, they're the rotating villains. Their votes are absolutely necessary. And so they get paid maybe a little bit extra to go and tank those policies. And so they take the heat, but they also get the money. And the Democratic Party, again, and most importantly, the donors, which really runs the entire show, don't have to pay more in taxes and don't get to see their profits go down. That's what it is. And so this is, again, and ironically, of course, the same party where this happens, the leadership of the party keeps telling us, oh no, we can't vote for progressives, we have to vote for moderates. No, we don't, and we shouldn't. Because when we do, understand that we get fuck all of our agenda. Between those people, and by the way, the unelected parliamentarian, which we don't have to listen to. By the way, parliamentarian says, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, okay, well, that's a good suggestion. You know what we're going to do? We're going to replace the parliamentarian with someone else. Next, please. Yeet. Out. Gone. Look, these are the things, right? Just bullshit blocks that are put in our way so that nothing gets done. And again, that should be very, very concerning come the midterms. Because, again, right now there is still a chance that Biden, if he chooses to do so, can successfully bully Manchin and Sinema, use the sticks. We're all out of carrots. It's time for the stick. All right? And there are definitely ways that you can go after Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and get them in line with the Democrats' agenda. They just have to be strong enough to use it. Because if they don't, midterms are coming, and if Republicans win, absolutely nothing's going to happen at all. There will be no chance, lame duck, and here comes Donald Trump in 2024. That's what it always happens. We've seen this movie before, but we actually have time to fix it. So let's do so. All right. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. That's all the stories I've got for you today. We went super long, so that's on me. There's just always so much content to talk about, and all these details that I have to get into. So anyway, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important that you do so. I don't have any super chats or anything like that, unfortunately. Again, that helps. That really helps the stream. That helps the show. So you do that. Really, really appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Other ways you can help us: patreon.com/chefwaldorf. Become a member. Do it that way. YouTube member. Or you can also support us on Twitch. September, so it's 20% off Twitch subs. Gift them or anything like that. All right, everybody. Thank you all. I mentioned it's my birthday next week. Same Monday. Might take that day off. All right. Anyway, thank you all. Love you, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great day.
There's some whores in this town.
Give me a break. I was thinking. Please clap. They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate.